Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today I'm joined with Vincent Zurzolo. How you doing today, Vincent?
Doing great. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Well, yeah, before we jump in, tell the listeners a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Vincent Zurzolo. I'm the president and co-owner of Metropolis Collectibles, the world's largest dealership for vintage comic books, as well as ComicConnect.com, the premier online auction site for vintage comic books, original art, and other types of collectibles. I've been buying and selling comic books since I was around 15 years old and loving them since before I could even read. I've been very blessed to be able to turn my passions into a career and create a fantastic business. Also, recently published my own comic book called The Addiction. I host a podcast called Comic Zone about comic books, and I interview creators and people involved in the comic book industry and entertainment and pop culture. I also co-founded the longest running comic book convention in New York City, Big Apple Conventions. And I'm sure there's a few other things. Oh, we sold the first $1 million comic book back in 2010, and 1.1, 1.5, 1.75, 2.2, 3.2, and $4.7 million comic books. We've been doing this quite a while, and we're constantly buying, selling, taking consignments, and I'm ready to talk comic books.
Wow. $1 million comic books. That's that's something I didn't expect. What were the comics that sold for that much?
So the first comic book we sold was an Action Comics #1, CGC graded 8.0 from 1938. It's the first appearance of Superman. It's got a big picture of Superman holding a car over his head. I was able to sell that piece to a client. And then the funniest thing happened, literally right after that, we made that sale public. Another client called us and said, "Hey, I want one too. Why don't you call me on that one?" So we found him one that was an 8.5 and sold him that copy for $1.5 million. And So that's a golden age comic book, meaning it's from the 1930s to the 50s, Action Comics #1. We also sold the first $1 million comic book from the Silver Age of comic books, which is the 1960s. So that was Amazing Fantasy 15, CGC graded 9.6. That was for $1.1 million back in the day. That actual copy has actually sold for $3 million since. And when I say CGC, that's a third-party grading service that encapsulates a comic book, authenticates it, and gives it a grade on it. The 1 through 10 grade scale that is used throughout the world of comic books was created by my partner, Stephen Fischler. We also pitched the concept of third-party grading to a company called CCG, which started CGC, Comics Grading Corporation, Comics Guarantee Corporation. And it's really opened up the marketplace for people who don't know how to grade comic books to be able to invest, buy, sell comic books. It's almost commoditized them to a sense so that you can go into the marketplace as a novice, but know you like Spider-Man and you want it this grade point, and you can go out and find that book. And as I said earlier, we have event auctions going on quarterly. We're actually building up to our next one on ComicConnect.com, as well as 6 other mega monthly auctions per year. And we're very, very excited about the types of product we bring to the world, the community in comics and original comic art. We also deal to a lesser extent in pulps, which are the predecessors of comic books from the 19s to the 1950s. We've also started to build up the foreign comics market, which is a market that hasn't had a lot of attention paid to it by the auction world, but we're starting to do that. We've been building up so people from all over the world collect comic books that were made in their countries or in other countries. And that's been a really exciting part of the market that we've seen grow. Of course, also original comic art, which is on fire.
So what's the difference between comic books and comic art?
So original comic art is the actual drawing that somebody drew, an artist drew the comic book pages on, the cover, the interior pages, splash pages, things like that. A comic book is just what we know it to be, a comic book that you read. So some people collect both. Some people collect comics, some people collect art. And it's a really fun and interesting way to build a collection, different types of themes. Some people in comics and art collect specific artists, first appearances. Um, important events that happen, the death of a character, the introduction of a character, a first kiss, you name it. There's a lot of different ways that people collect. I've known people who collect lamppost covers. Any cover that has a lamppost on it, some reason they like lampposts. Other people collect golf covers. Other people collect football covers, sports covers, Christmas covers. There's so many different ways to go, and it's really fun. There's a lot out there. People often think about comic books just being superheroes, but there are so many other genres. There's funny animals, there's romance, there's war, there's horror, and all these different genres help build up to this really interesting tapestry of collectibles and things for people to enjoy for entertainment purposes, to read for escapism. I know for me as a kid, I loved reading comic books. I learned a lot of words that my friends in school didn't know from comic books, and I had a greater appreciation for art from comic books. So there's a lot of different levels to this world.
So let me ask you, people are spending a lot on comic books. Are they actually reading them, or is it all encased in carbonite so you can't read it?
Yes, carbonite. Well, people do collect what we call raw comics, which are comics that are not encapsulated. They're just in a bag of some sort, and they will read those. People do collect investment grade comic books, and they're encapsulated in a holder. And oftentimes, they've already read the comic books at an earlier part of their life, and now they're ready to buy one that's an investment grade. You can also read a lot of these comic books digitally online, so you don't necessarily have to open up a 9.6 graded comic book to enjoy it. You can read it in other ways. There's also many reprints of comic books, so they make hard trade paperbacks and hardcovers for older stories so that you can read them continuously and again without worrying about messing up an old comic book.
Interesting. So I noticed when my kids are younger, used to go to Newbury Comics and big store around here in the Boston area. And I used to take them there because I thought it would be fun. There were some toys in there and there were comic books, and I thought my kids would really like them. Now, when I was younger, I thought comics were cool. Like, you go to the 7-Eleven or whatever, and there's some comics, you buy them, and it wasn't as big of a deal as maybe like before, but it was kind of interesting. And now, like I don't know, my kids never got into them, even though I thought they would. But when I went in, I saw I forget what they're called, but they're stories, like long, like a book, like not like the typical comic book where it's like, 7, 10 pages, but like, what's the term? I'm drawing a blank on here now.
Trade paperback,
No, no, no. It's
compilation, compendium,
no, it's
graphic novel.
graphic novel. There you go. That's what it was. Graphic novel. And so I saw them and they were really, really thick, but it was like I don't know, the movie Sin City, wasn't that a graphic novel? Yeah.
Sin City, Sin City were comic books first and then became graphic novels when they were compiled. Um, a graphic novel is just a fancy way of saying a comic book, and it's fine. People seem to, usually a higher quality paper, but the average comic book, just so the audience is understands, an average comic book is about 24 pages, 22 to 24 pages. A compendium or graphic novel is usually longer, larger. And graphic novels are great. I love graphic novels. Dark Knight Returns was made in the graphic novel format. That's one of the quintessential stories of the 1980s by Frank Miller, Lynn Varley, about an older, disgruntled Batman in a dystopian world. Killing Joke is another great story, very highly collected. It's the story where the Joker, amongst the many other things, he shoots Barbara Gordon and leads her to being paralyzed and turns her into a character called Oracle. But I digress. I can get into comic book minutia. So the overall idea here is yes, different formats appeal to different people. Most graphic novels are not worth the type of money that vintage comic books are worth, but there are some that have value. Yes.
So what's so I remember reading comics as a kid. Um, and I think back then it had a certain appeal. I wonder, like, what has been the trend in the last 20 years with comic books? because so much is moving towards digital and so few things are being done, you know, in on real paper. Like, what's the
Well,
trend there?
here's what I can tell you is um, print comic books are still alive and they're doing very well. We had some disruption in the distribution market late last year, early, and into this year. Diamond Distribution went bankrupt. That was the biggest distributor of comic books, current comic books in the United States. Um, there are trends where people are reading comic books digitally and online. So, as I mentioned earlier, I published my first comic book last year as a childhood dream of mine called The Addiction. It's about a woman who can drug you with her touch. And we launched this comic book both digitally and in print. To give you some perspective, we launched the comic book digitally on a comic book app called Vivi. That's VEVE, and it's almost like an NFT. It's a tokenized version of a comic book, so people can collect these. Each one is unique, and they're limited editions. And each cover, there are different covers for each comic book, and has a different scarcity level. To give you some perspective, our number one issue, we sold 6,000 copies in 1 hour at $7 a piece digitally. Our number two issue, we sold 4,500 copies in 34 minutes. So in the direct market, we sold about 8,000 copies of number one, and about, I think it was 4,000 copies of number two at $5 a piece. Um, so there are trends and changes in formats of reading comic books, but the world is still enjoying comic books. And one of the other trends that I think has been really extraordinary, especially for me to see, um, is the incredible love and acceptance that Japanese manga has had around the world. I'd say it's the most popular type of comic book in the world. Now, a manga being collected for investment is happening, but is very smaller. It's much smaller than American comic books. Americans are probably the largest collecting base for vintage comic books, probably followed by Europeans, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Canada, those types of those areas of the world. But manga seems to be enjoyed by everybody around the world. I go to comic conventions in Italy and in London, and you see tons of people dressed up in the manga character cosplay, enjoying and reading manga. And just to give you perspective, everybody, manga is the comic book format, and anime is the animated version of manga or original stories. And I have to say, they're really creative, they're really fun, they're very different than American typical format American comic books. And as to me, as long as somebody's reading something that is sequential art, which is basically what a comic book is, I'm a very happy person. I think it's the greatest American art form. I put it up there against jazz any day of the week, and I think more people should read comic books. It's great for escapism, entertainment. It teaches a lot of valuable lessons to kids as well as adults, and you can get so much inspiration from it. I can't tell you how many times I've met a client who I asked, "How did you get into comic books?" And or sorry, "How did you get into your career?" Whether they were a doctor, a lawyer, a firefighter, you name it, a police officer, they all said, "Hey, I read comic books as a kid, and I knew I never have superpowers, but I wanted to help people. So that's why I chose the career path I did." So comic books can have an effect in so many different ways.
Yeah, I know the mediums have changed over time, right? So it used to be comic books and then TV, and now you've got movies of all these superheroes, right? You got Marvel movies, and they started off strong, and maybe they're not so strong now with the quality,
Mm,
but it's yeah, the escapism is really an interesting aspect of this, which I think it kind of goes through trends with culture. Um, so what's interesting to me is art has kind of transformed from like guilty pleasure, whatever, to an investment. And I've seen this a lot in different formats, but the art world has taken off, and whether it's NFTs or comic books or, paintings, the money being thrown at art is crazy now. Um, do you see that continuing? Because it gets to the point where it's just unaffordable for the average person to
yeah.
partake in this as an investment themselves?
So when you're talking about art going crazy, there's fine art, quote unquote fine art, there's comic book art, there's all types of pop art, there's a lot of different types of art. And yes, the general trend is that this stuff is being bought at ever increasing levels. We saw a giant jump in all collectibles during the pandemic, and then the softening of the markets, and now things I think are starting to come back again. In terms of fine art, I think you'll see, as long as there's billionaires and eventually trillionaires, there'll be people buying art for ridiculous prices, and some pieces I think warrant a huge number. And others I don't know. I think it's a little weird, like taping a banana to a wall. I just don't know how that's worth millions of dollars or whatever it's sold for. As far as original comic art, we're seeing a definite increase in demand. And then one thing you have to understand is you don't have to be a millionaire or a billionaire to buy this stuff. There's comic books and comic art for every budget. And I have collectors who spend a couple of $100s on a piece of original comic art, and then collectors who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, on comic art. So, and same thing with comic books. You can get comic books for $1 a piece, and they're great stories and they're fun to read. And then you can go up and up and up and up into the millions. So there's always something there depending on what your budget is or your discretionary income is. And the best thing I tell people is to figure out what you like, set up your goals, your want list, so to speak, of the comic books or original comic art that you'd like to try to buy in, let's say, the next year. And then you make your list, and then leave yourself figure out what your budget is, and leave yourself 10% discretionary to buy something that just comes up that you might like. Because sometimes it's very hard when you're focused on something and you see something else that you like. It's very tempting. So the way I try to do it is just give yourself a little leeway so that you can buy something else that you might like that doesn't fit exactly into your collection. Me as a collector, I started collecting when I was a little kid. I was the kid scraping together nickels, dimes, quarters to buy a comic book. Now I'm very excited and happy to be able to announce, I have a collection worth millions of dollars, and eventually I'll sell it. It's you can't take it with you, or you can leave it to your kids. But we get that a lot where people will set us up as the go-to for, God forbid, or when they pass away, for their family to reach out to. Um, in terms of the movies you mentioned earlier not being of the same quality, there still are great comic book movies. It's the same thing as any other genre, but comic books get a lot more publicity. So, I mean, there are great rom-coms and there are crappy rom-coms. There are great horror movies and there are bad horror movies. There are great dramas and there are terrible dramas. So it should be no different in comic book movies are here to stay. It's a specific type of genre, and there are going to be great ones and there are going to be not so great ones. I'm personally looking forward to the new Superman movie that's coming out this summer, and I'm really looking forward to the Fantastic Four as well. I think they're both going to be very different, and I think they're going to be fantastic. No pun intended. We discuss a lot of this stuff on my podcast called The Comic Zone. And as I mentioned earlier, we're always buying. Metropolis is always buying. Comic Connect is always taking consignments, and we're happy to talk to people about their collections. If anybody out there has a collection, you can reach us through our websites, metropoliscomics.com and comicconnect.com.
Great. Well, Vincent, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. Yeah, any kind of final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think everybody out there should pick up a comic book. They're great. And if you want to read my comic book, it's shop.theaddiction.co, and it's a great story, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
Awesome. Well, Vincent, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room, as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room.
All right, that was a great interview with Vincent. Really appreciate him coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show. We have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, everybody. So happy to talk collectibles.
Awesome. Well, glad to have you here. And we also have our very own Phil Weiss. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Kirk, good to be here. I'm looking forward to talking about collectibles at Wells. Should be fun, a different kind of topic today.
Oh, this is gonna be a great topic. Everyone's gonna put on their Comic-Con outfits, and we're gonna start chatting away here. So, Barb, what were some of your takeaways from the interview?
Collectibles are hot. I mean, they are really hot. And if you're thinking, oh, yeah, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, there is big money from Pokemon cards, baseball cards, fractional art shares, obviously comic books, figures, everything. It is an insane industry. And if you've already got your stocks and bonds and you've got a lot of crap laying around your house that you don't think is worth anything, think again. You might be sitting on a gold mine.
I couldn't agree more. Phil, what are some of your thoughts?
It's funny you mentioned Pokemon cards, Barb, because I remember when one of my kids was like, I would say he was about 12 years old, he found out that he had a Pokemon card that was worth several $100s that, he got out of a pack. And he found somebody, and like for him, that was a huge amount of money. So he went and sold it. He doesn't have it anymore. But from I remember when I was a kid, my uncle, he collected stamps and he gave me some stamps. That wasn't really that interesting to me, but I started collecting mostly baseball cards. I have some football cards and some others, and I brought them to him and I showed them to him. He said, "Save these. They'll be worth something someday." So I will tell you that except for some that ended up like on the floor of a shed at my house that got kind of weather beaten, the rest of the cards, except for when I actually had a good buddy of mine he was actually best man at my wedding. He and I used to go to card shows, and we would set up a table and we would sell things, and we would go out and buy like at wholesale prices young guys that we thought had a chance to be good and things like that. And I still have a bunch. I have so many in my basement. My wife is like, you're just sitting there. They're not doing anything. You should sell these. I'm like, but they're still appreciating in value while they just sit there, because it's not like they're getting wet or anything. But it has changed some from then. I know when during the interview, Vince talked about the one comic book that one of his clients had and sold, and then he bought another one, and it was a significant amount more money because it was at a higher grade. So I know that those are so important. When I used to do the shows, we just kind of looked at it and we made our own determination as to what was what. But now it's become much more of an industry, and everything's got to be graded in order for you to get the right price. And the quality of the card or whatever the collectible is makes a huge difference in its value.
Well, on the baseball card show, Jag, we went because my husband and I are in the process of getting graded and selling many of his very old baseball cards. And we went to a show last week and I was chatting with a guy and he said these big buyers, we live in the Bay Area, he said they come in from LA with boatloads of cash. It was 1 hour after the show had opened, and the guy said, "Look, I already made $5,000." He said he was at a show where somebody sold some cards for in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So this is legit, but Phil, like you said, I mean, there are protocols now in terms of all collectibles. You have to know, the value, you have to know the marketplace, you have to have them authenticated, whatever they are. And then, like anything else, you can sell them for really big prices.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have to report it on my tax return as a side business. It was like a Schedule C. I reported the
I'm
cost of
not
what I then
doing
owed it.
that.
Of course you have to, Phil. Let's be frank. Of
No,
course you
this
have to
is a
report it.
hobby, Phil. I have already made that decision. It is a hobby. I am claiming no
Should
expenses.
I call the IRS, Barb?
No, don't tell them.
Because no one
And
else will know, Barb. It's just our
nobody's ever
secret
going
here.
to
Just
know
us three
now.
chickens.
But I have a business. My husband has a business. We pay enough taxes. Okay. This is a hobby.
We paid
I'm not
sales
sure the
taxes
IRS would
too,
agree, Barb.
or like the state sales taxes. We used to pay sales taxes on them too.
I don't want to have this conversation.
Okay.
This is
Well,
not where I'm going with this. I
all
have
right.
already made my decision. I am already nauseous with the amount of taxes I already pay.
All right. I won't argue with you. You can pay whatever kind of taxes you want. It's a voluntary tax system, Barb.
Thank you. That is what I'm talking about. And by the way, I'm going to start living off the grid too. So this is just my first step into self-sufficiency.
This is going
I,
to give you the money to do that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Barb, I've got a hat for you. I'm wearing it right now. I'm going to send it in the mail.
Love it. I need one right now.
For those of you audio viewers, it's made out of tinfoil, so it's perfect for Barb and her off the grid
Yes,
living.
send me out one.
Oh boy. Well, I will say I find it really interesting in what's happening in the, I guess you call it the art world, collectibles art. We interviewed a few people lately about this, and Vincent was one of them. We actually interviewed an art guy as well, and art's kind of this weird thing, but it's people have so much money that they're just willing to spend whatever on the highest grade stuff. And what I find interesting, and I think this is really important context, is if you're looking at any collectible, you need to have the highest quality. And if you're collecting currency, like Zim dollars, for instance, or Bolivars, you need to collect the highest value that it got to. So for Zimbabwe, for the Zim dollars, if you have the $100 trillion note, and I'm making the numbers up because I don't have them in front of me, you might get $200 a note. But if you have the $10 trillion note, and by the way, they're all worthless, but if you get the $10 trillion note, it might only go for 20 bucks. And I'm not saying that because there's an extra zero. I'm saying that it might even be like 400 to like $10. It's not commensurate with the decimal. It's the idea that the highest valuation note goes for an exponentially more amount, even though you can buy it for the same thing. Because I remember when I was picking these things up because people were giving them away, I got a variety of them. And you could buy for like $1. It was like 20 cents or something for like a Zim note, but for like 100 trillion, it was like $2. So I was like, I'm just gonna get these 20 cents. I can get more of them. But there's a reason why there were more. And I think this holds true for a lot of collectibles and same for art, right? If you look at the Christie's, they get these $100 million pieces of art. Well, people want those. But if it's only a million, they're like, it's not going to appreciate as much. So there's something about the highest quality of the category that goes for an exponentially bigger amount than just the tier two amounts. I find that fascinating. I have a friend who buys cards and grades them and then sells them because there's actually a margin of profit you can get in there just by grading them. So if you buy a card for $100, it might cost you $10 to grade it. I don't remember, but let's say it's $10. And then you could sell it for 200. Like he does that. He just buys a bunch of stuff and just turns it over. To me, it's fascinating that there's an arbitrage opportunity right now for the people who really want to put in the time. So Barb, I'm very curious to see what you're going to do with all your baseball cards that you have, being the big
Oh,
baseball
it
card
is
collector.
insane. We already have, I'm not going to say it on the air because
She
I've
might get
already
robbed.
said too much. I'm probably already going to jail. So,
I'll watch your card collection, Barb. Don't
yeah,
worry.
yeah.
I'll
But
protect it.
we have a significant amount of value we anticipate. And one thing that I'm finding, because they do have these graphs on the online where you put in the details so you can look up your specific card and you can find out, first of all, how much it's sold for at recent auctions, how the value is appreciated or depreciated over time. And I have kind of a ringer in that my husband is a huge baseball fan. So he's not like, somebody that just is looking for it for money. I'm the one looking for it for money. He's the one that really knows the details of the players, and they go up and they go down just like any other asset. And so you have to understand the trends as well. But like
It's
you guys said, now the markets are just very hot on the collectibles in general.
Yeah, and they go through cycles. It's like NFTs. Like NFTs were hot. You can get them for like $200,000 for an NFT, and then they were cold, and you can get it for like 20 bucks for the same thing. They go through cycles. I remember as a kid, it's funny, I went to the Baseball Hall of Fame and it was just, I don't know, driving through the area for something else. So we stopped by, and this is before it is now. Like back then, it was like a room with a bunch of plaques, and that was pretty much it. Now they've got like 100 baseball fields. It's like going to Disney World for baseball. It's crazy now, and they make so much money. Um, they say, oh, you can play at the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it's cool. Like I'm sure it's a great experience, just like Disney World is, but it's just too much about the money. Actually, sports disgust me right now because it's just all a big money grab. But that being said, at the time I was at the Baseball Hall of Fame, like virtually no one was there, and at the end they had a gift shop, and you'd think they'd have baseball cards everywhere, like, oh, you can buy baseball cards at the Baseball Hall of Fame. No, there was one thing they sold. It was the 1989, I think it was, Donruss, like all the card, like every player. It was like the full deck. And they sold it, and it was like, I don't know, 18 bucks or whatever it was. Um, so I picked it up because it was the only baseball cards they sold. It was just so weird. Anyway, so we pick it up, and just out of coincidence, it was like 93 or something like that. Jose Canseco's rookie card was going itself for like 120 bucks alone. And this is when he was thought to be like the next, Ted Williams or whatever. And like an idiot, I didn't sell because I thought, well, just appreciate. I probably should have sold it, the whole set, for like 140 bucks and left. Now the whole set's probably still worth only 140 bucks because there's no one else in there. But it was a lesson of the variability of price based on the player at the time, because that was his rookie year. That was Canseco's rookie year, when I think it was 86 or 87. It was his rookie year. So, it was a big deal. And so I find it really fascinating. But towards the end of my baseball card collection endeavor, what was it called? Upper Deck came out with, it used to be just like Topps, Fleer, and Donruss. Those are the three. Then they came out with Upper Deck, and Upper Decks were like, wow, like this card's really cool looking, it's shiny, and everyone wanted them. Now, I don't know, there are like 100 different brands. Like it's different now, but back then it was simpler. It was a simpler time. Um, and I've got tons of like hockey cards. Like at one time I had Wayne Gretzky's rookie card. Like no one cares about hockey except for maybe Canadians. But like the hockey cards didn't have the same cachet that the baseball cards had.
Well,
Go ahead, Barb.
talking about the brands, we have a lot of really beautiful Allen and Ginter cards, which look like paintings. And we thought, oh, these are going to be worth so much. Do you know the brand that we have found is the most valuable? Tops.
Tops.
These
It's one of the
beautiful
first.
cards are so, they're artistic, not worth anything. So, and just one more collectible story. So, my daughter, when she was, in elementary school, of course, there was the Beanie Baby craze. And she had a robust collection. And she bought the book that told the value of all the Beanie Babies. And she was like, oh, my Beanie Baby collection is worth so much money. Fast forward about 10 years, it's like they're worth nothing.
Yeah.
Demand is gone. She's like, I should have sold them when I was in elementary school. Now I've got all these Beanie Babies that are virtually worthless.
It's like tulips. It's like the tulip craze. I mean, seriously, it's the same thing, right? Tulips were going for like the price of a house at one point. Like one tulip equaled a house. Like, and I think this is a lesson for everybody, whether it's collectibles or stocks. Like, you sell in, what do they say when the ducks are quacking, you feed them on Wall Street? Like, you sell in to the demand. If people are just crazy offering you way too much money, you sell into it. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned. And at some point, I got to go through my collection. I've got all sorts of stuff that I need to get rid of. I have like, I'll tell you a funny story, and I want to get Phil's take too. Um, I've got a bunch of autographs from baseball players. I'm not going to tell you which ones because I don't want to get robbed. But they're good baseball players. I'll tell you one of them actually, because when I was a kid, I have a picture. So Ted Williams, he had a book come out called The Science of Hitting. It's the best hitting book I've ever seen. It's to this day, just nothing beats it. And so he was selling his book. So he would come in and he basically said, "All right, I'm gonna do a book signing." Well, lo and behold, there were lines around the block for this because it's Ted Williams, who's retired, who's, I think I must have been like 9 or something, like the best hitter ever, arguably, depending on who you talk to. But so he's doing signatures. So what happens? So me, my buddies, our parents, we sat in line for like 4 hours to get signatures. We brought everything: balls, bats, paper, books, everything. It was like, sign it all, Teddy. Like, and he was cool. He was like, yeah, just sign everything. So like all this stuff, I'm sure it's valuable now, but like I'm not gonna sell that. Like it's just like a memory. Like it'll be worth more in the future. Like there's people like that that'll definitely still be worth something, um but there does come a point where it's like, is this too ridiculous? Where should we just sell the stuff, put it into gold, and like how much more ridiculous is it going to get? And I don't know. What do you think, Phil?
I don't know. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, but I'll tell you, I don't anymore because I have to itemize it to do it. But at one point I had my collection itemized and I used to have insurance on it because, you know, something happened at the house and they were damaged, like the cards are wasted. But you talk about all the different brands, like some of the brands I remember it used to be just tops. And then, like you said, there was Donruss and Fleer got licenses, and then Upper Deck. And I know there's a lot of other companies, Bowman, and a lot of these other companies. Like Bowman was there before Tops, and then they went away, and then they came back. But some of them, like the Donruss cards, like you would think usually like the rookie card of a player is the most valuable one that they have, especially if he becomes good. And there was back in the 70s, I remember having one that had Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker on the same card. And at the time, you thought both were going to be in the Hall of Fame, only one. And I think Paul Molitor's on it too. So it has like 2 Hall of Famers because they used to have these rookie cards with 4 guys on them. But the value changes. Like you think a guy's good. Like I said, my friend and I, we used to buy these rookie cards of like my friend. I used to study the baseball guys and like know who all the guys in the draft were. And he'd say, okay, so who should we be focusing on this year? And like we would do. And like I said before we started that I have Derek Jeter. They had minor league upper deck cards, and I have a Derek Jeter. I have more. I have multiple Derek Jeter upper deck minor league cards, which are rare in the other. But the production of a lot of these things that has a big impact on their value. But they do go up and down. The guys that become great players, like those, I don't think lose value, right? Because those players, everybody wants, everybody knows who they are. And I mean, there's like the Mickey Mantle. I think it's like the Mickey Mantle, the 1951 Mickey Mantle card, which is his rookie card.
Yep.
It's worth millions. Like I've
Yeah.
seen that it's gone at auction for millions. And you talked about Gretzky. There's a Gretzky rookie card that goes for millions too. Like like the guys that are really great players, their cards go for so much money. It's ridiculous. And somebody will all of a sudden somebody will find one that was like in an attic someplace that they didn't even know existed, that kind of thing. But there's so many stories too about people that had them, and then they left the home and their mother threw them out or something like that, right? Because it's just pieces of paper. What do we need these for? And then we found out that they could have value. Mine sit there in my basement. I haven't looked at them for a long time. I haven't, my kids didn't have it, although my kids all love sports and like we're in my house. Sorry, Kirk, but we're Yankee fans in my house, right? But
That's
my
okay.
kids
No
are
one's perfect,
all,
Phil.
but my kids all love this, but will watch the games and know the players, but they never really got into the cards. So I never really shared the hobby with them as much. But we've gone a couple places. Like I have a friend that knew Ken Griffey Sr., and I remembered him as a player. And I went in my basement and I found a Ken Griffey card that I had in my basement. And I brought it with me when I got to meet him. And it was really a fun experience because I remember him when George Steinbrenner was around and he was a Yankee. And I remembered stories. So like I started to talk to him about stories, and then like he had so much more to add. And it was a really fun conversation. Like those type of things are really fun to do. Like his cards aren't worth a ton because he wasn't the player that his son was, but like the Ken Griffey Upper Deck card, like that's the junior
Yep.
when he was a rookie. Like that's a really valuable card. Like guys that make the Hall of Fame, I think those cards have staying power, right? But a lot of the other guys, it's they come and they go.
You mentioned the attic part. It's funny. I remember talking to my dad about this as a kid because I was into it, and I actually had a pen pal in Canada. So I went up to Canada, and they was playing hockey up there, and they had at one of the games they had cards. So there's this kid over there selling cards, and it was kind of cool. So I met him, and like, oh well, we should pen pal because it's way back for the internet. And so, like, he would send me some, I'd send him some. So it's kind of cool. Um, anyway, so the brand, the hockey cards are OPC. That was like prior to Topps, those OPC cards. And so anyway, so I remember talking, I don't know how I went down that rabbit hole, but so I remember talking to my dad about this, and he's like, oh, well, we have plenty of those cards as kids. We had a lot of those like really valuable cards as kids, but we used to just throw them at the wall. Like there was a game where you chuck it at the wall, and if it leaned, like whoever was close to the wall would get all the cards. I was like, but you ruined the cards. He's like, yeah, whatever. We didn't think it was worth anything. Or my favorite, yeah, we put those in our bicycle tires and the spokes, and they used to make noise. I'm like, oh my God, that's painful. Like, like no one
Yeah,
had
that
any
was a big
foresight.
deal in
Yeah,
our neighborhood as well.
one of my favorite bad things that I did. So when I was a kid, so I liked Thurman Munson. And there was Johnny Bench, and because he wasn't Thurman Munson, everybody said Johnny Bench was so much better, which I know he was, but I didn't like him. So like my Johnny Bench card, I remember I have one that I took a pin and I like poked holes in his
Oh,
eyes and stuff because I didn't like him. Like, with 2020 hindsight, that was like so stupid because it just like cratered the value of that card. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the fact that I was a Yankee fan and it was Thurman Munson and he was better than anybody. Didn't matter.
I'd like to shift a little to another trend in collectibles, which is really hot now, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. A lot of these new alternative investment platforms, places like Fundrise and Yield Street, they will sell fractional shares of either ownership or of debt for very expensive artwork, with the idea that you'll either get some dividends or else you'll participate in appreciation. What do you think of that?
you first, Phil. I've got some thoughts on this, but I'm gonna bite my tongue for a minute.
I mean, I've heard about it. I know I've heard a couple places where they've talked about it. I think you have to be really knowledgeable about artwork and the artists and everything else to do that because there can be a lot of excitement around somebody that's just done falsely just to get people to buy. I'm not really, personally, I wouldn't do that. Like I've heard about it. It's just not something I would do. Like it sounds cool. Like and I know what the value. I mean, it was really, we were just in Amsterdam and I went to the Van Gogh Museum and like listening to, Van Gogh didn't become famous till after he was dead. And like the whole story that we learned in the museum is so his brother was a big supporter of his. He thought that Vincent was good. His brother was Theo, and Theo was an art dealer. And he wanted Vincent to be famous. And Theo got married. And this was right before Vincent shot himself and killed himself. And then they had a son, Theo and his wife, that they named Vincent. And then Theo got sick several months after Vincent died. And his wife, even though she hardly knew Vincent because this was so important to Theo, she's really the reason that Van Gogh became so popular, not just in Amsterdam, around the world, and why that museum is there. And her son Vincent became a mechanical engineer, and he also helped. He was, like I said, his name was Vincent too, but she like sold some of his artwork, not to make money, but just to help like create interest in his art. And all the works that are in the museum, most of them came from her putting them there, but it was really through her efforts and then her sons that we even know who Van Gogh is. And it was all because Theo thought that his brother was a really good artist and wanted him to do that. But like that's how art works, right? Like we don't necessarily know who's good and who's bad. And like in this case, nobody even knew who Van Gogh was. He was a starving artist, right? He had a lot of issues, and he was, the other many of the other Dutch artists were very different because they were more aligned with the Italians, and Van Gogh was more aligned with the French Impressionists. Like he knew Monet, and he would go to France, but nobody knew who he was till after he was gone. And like that happens a lot with art, is that it's so hard to figure out what would be valuable. I feel like there's way more speculation unless you are knowledgeable and have done the research. It's not an area that I'd be comfortable touching.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents. I'm gonna give I'm gonna give my 2 cents. I'm gonna give a framework for everybody to think about. So we did interview a guy on artwork actually recently, Phil. I'm just trying to pull up his name here, Philip Hoffman. We talked about investing in art, and we talked off the air because there's certain things people don't want to talk about, and I don't want to put people on the spot, but. There is a company that people have heard of that sell fractional art, and it, I'm not going to say it's a fraud, but let's just say it's misrepresenting what's going on. Um, I think one of the things that happens, and it's not just art, it's actually a lot of things on Wall Street, is the institutions, the insiders, they buy their stuff, they get a good deal, they take advantage of it. Take private equity, perfect example. Private equity, it's great. Everyone should, like they're all buying it, and then they realize, oh crap, there's no more people to buy. Oh, let's sell it to the rubes now. And so they start to sell it to retail, and now they're allowing it into 401ks, and they're basically going to stuff all their bad stuff into the retail crowd, and then that's it, right? It requires more money to grow, so it's not really they're not all good investments. Some of them are, and I think artwork's kind of similar, where art is what you're willing to pay for it. It's like crypto. It's like, what's it worth? I don't know. Like, what's Bitcoin worth? It's what somebody's willing to pay for it. It doesn't really have any value outside of the fact that that someone's willing to pay for it. Gold, use it in jewelry, right? People use it for art, they use it for all sorts of stuff. There's extra value built into it, but a lot of crypto, like not all crypto, like Ethereum's used, but like Bitcoin isn't really used. It's just people find it to be the most important one, and that's what brings it value. So if you think about it from that perspective, like what is investing in art going to do for you? Are you trying to get rich? Well, if you're not buying $100 million piece of art, then you're probably not going to get rich owning art. You might make some money, or you buy it for enjoyment, right? But everyone's kind of gotten into the speculation game, and they're like, "Oh, I want to own a Monet." Like, do you? Like, if you, if somebody's buying a Monet and they're fractionalizing it and selling to other people, it means that they're charging you a lot more than it's worth. Or why would they do it? Why wouldn't they just sell it to somebody else? So I don't think a lot of people understand the concept of um, getting in doesn't always give you the best value. Now, it doesn't apply for everything, but in the case of art, from what I understand from talking to people, is that a lot of the art that people are fractionalizing is you're overpaying for it, and then it just never appreciates once you own it, and then you can't get out of it. So you kind of get stuck with it. Um, and so I think a lot of people just need to think about it. Like, if I'm gonna buy like comic books or like the Superman's first edition, it's because I read that as a kid. I didn't read it, but like I read it as a kid and I enjoy it and it brings me joy, right? It's art beyond the fact that it's worth a ridiculous amount of money, right? Or you buy art because it brings you joy. It just so happens to cost a lot of money and you can rub it in your friend's face, hey, I got Monet. But you know, we should be buying these things for the joy it brings and not just about the money. You can make it a business, but I think a lot of people see it as easy money and then they end up getting burned. And I mean, I've got plenty of cards I got to go through and grade them and see if they're worth it. I don't know, but is that what I want to do with my free time? Not really. There's easier ways to make a buck than doing that. That sounds like a lot of work to me. That's something my kids should do, not me. But yeah, maybe when I'm retired, I get a lot of free time. But anyway, I think there's a lot to this. I brought my kids to the comic store, Newbury Comics, when they were younger because I thought they would enjoy it as much as I did. They just didn't. They just didn't enjoy the comics. And I was like, really? This is cool. Like, you like Star Wars. Why don't you like this? And they're like, eh. As a kid, I love that stuff. So I think it's not for everybody. I think there has to be some affinity to it or some tie-in to make it worth it. Because otherwise, it's just stuff taking up space in your basement. So,
When you talked about how they stick the good with the bad, like that makes me think of the great financial crisis because that's what they did with the mortgage loans, right? Like you had some good ones that were sitting at the top, but then they would stick all this crap in there and nobody took the time to look and see what was in there. And that's what happened. That's why you had so many of those bonds that went bad and why we had that crisis because you had all these really bad mortgages that got sucked in with a few good ones. It sounds like to me like that is replicating what they did before.
yeah, it's not. I mean, that's the Wall Street secret code. Take something, package it up, wrap it up into different layers, and sell off the pieces, and upcharge everybody on it, and then we'll go home and go to the bar and throw around hundreds to all the waitresses. I mean, it's just. I'm just thinking of the movie The Big Short, where everyone's there just throwing money around like woo. But I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Like, it's just. There's no easy way to do anything, right? If you want to do it right, you have to put in the time. You have to become an expert. All the things. I mean, my dad had a bunch of wine labels. I don't know what they're worth. I don't think they're worth anything, but I would imagine someone would pay for them because there's some beautiful art on some of these wine labels. I mean, absolutely beautiful. And I think it was like Mouton Rothschild, like they actually had a artist they paid an artist to come and design the labels for that year, and they're worth a lot of money. I don't know if the labels are, but hypothetically they would be if somebody paid for them. So what are they worth? I don't know. I guess it depends what somebody's willing to pay. Why would you want to buy a $10,000 bottle of wine that you're never going to drink? I don't know. Just to show it off. Hey, look at me. I got this bottle. Like, I mean, everyone's different. Everyone's got their thing that they're interested in. And I think if you do, then that's what you should focus on and not other things that, you're not an expert in because that's where you get burned. So anyway, we'll wrap it up here. So Barb, final thoughts from you.
I really resonate with what you said. I hate to admit it, Kirk, but
Thanks,
just
Barb.
this once,
You're
I'm
the
on your
best.
side. Particularly when you get into like buying these obscure assets that you're really not sure what they are, and they're alternative, they're private equity, it's just what the big guys are buying and you have a chance to buy them. Number one, know what you're investing in, know what the liquidity is, because collectibles are not liquid. Stocks are liquid. You can buy them, you can sell them. You can also evaluate a company to determine what their revenue is, what their earnings are, what their growth trend is. Not the same with collectibles. So when you're investing in anything, know the fees you're paying, get a sense of what the value is based on historical information. I'm Barbara Friedberg. You could find me on YouTube or at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance.
Yeah, thanks, Barb. Thanks for coming on the show. And it, it reminds me of I have to share this quick story. I'll give it off to you, Phil. You finally agreed with me, so I appreciate that, Barb. But it reminds me of the
Don't
story.
get used to it,
I won't.
Kirk.
I won't. I won't. I'll stay in my lane. Um, so I remember sitting in a bar. I was meeting with a wholesaler for a fund of funds that had a few different fund of funds. And those of you who don't know what those are, it's basically at the time it was fund of funds for hedge funds. So there were a bunch of big name hedge funds like David Einhorn, Seth Clarin, and Baupost, and like all these big name hedge funds. And nobody could get access to them. You needed like $100 million, and you need to put 10 million with them just to get access. Like it was clearly not for the everyday Joe. Um, but those are what everybody wanted. So what do? This fund of funds goes to them and says, "Hey, I'm going to put a slot for 10 million." And they did that with each of them. They said, "All right, I got 100 million. Now I got to sell this." So they packaged them all up into one fund, and then they sold that fund. Said, "Hey, we got to access all this stuff." And everybody's like, "Ooh, ooh, ooh," like me, give me some. And so they did that, and they had a few different tranches over the years. So I remember I said, "Oh, show me your track record." So I looked at them over the years, and you see all the returns, like the big fund managers, like 15%, 20%, 30%, all these returns, and then they got like five managers baked in there. And what do you see for the net result? It was like 3%, 4%. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why are the returns not 20? Like, this is ridiculous. And he's like, well, there's some fees in there. I'm like, that's a lot of fees. You know? And the point I'm trying to make, and before I hand off the mic here, is that what you think you're getting is not always what you're getting. It reminds me of that scene in The Big Short where he's like, yeah, it's basically dog shit wrapped in cat shit. And by the way, YouTube allows me to swear now as of this week, so I'm pretty happy about that. 2 thumbs up, YouTube. Apple might not agree, but anyway. So the point being is like you got this garbage wrapped in other garbage, and they're like, oh, you just like polish the turd on the top. It's fine, England, they know what that means. Just polish the turd. But I I think people really need to understand the layers and what's going on, and not just look at the shiny object on the surface, but actually see what you own, if you want to get good returns. Otherwise, you're just going to get run over by Wall Street every day, day in, day out, which is why we do the show, to enlighten people so they don't have to get taken advantage of. Phil, final thoughts from you.
So one of the things that I think that was said that I really agree with, when it comes to collectibles or anything else, make sure you have an interest. Don't just do it for the sake of making money. Make sure you have an interest in it, because if you have an interest in it, you're going to have a better chance of getting educated enough to understand what you're buying, and to understand and have a way that you might be able to make something if that's what you're doing it for. And with collectibles, you don't have to do it for a profit. It could just be something that you enjoy, that you want to own, and that's fine too. But just know what your purpose is, and make sure that it's something that you're interested in. Don't just go chasing for no reason, because usually when you just go chase, you end up with like what Kirk just said, and you're going to end up with a bunch of crap, and you're not going to make any money off of it. And so there's really no purpose if that's all you're doing it for. I'm Phil Weiss. My firm is Apprise Wealth Management. I know experiencing big life transitions can be stressful. My job is to help empower women facing new beginnings with the financial knowledge and tools they need to make self-assured decisions. As I said, my firm's Apprise Wealth Management. We'd love to get to know you. You can visit our website, which is apprisewealth.com. That's APPRISE wealth.com. And if you add /5-things to the end, you can download a free copy of 5 Things Every Woman Should Know About Finances. Thanks for having me today, Kirk. I enjoyed this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Phil, and thank you both.
That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.